All right, so we are going to build off of what we learned in incentives. And incentives, right, include anticipation and expectations. And so another question we can ask is, where do our expectations come from? And what plays a large role in where expectations come from are these topics of attribution, how we attribute certain things, certain behaviors, as well as control. So we'll get into attribution first, and then we'll talk about control later on. This first video will be pretty quick. We'll just be covering Weiners' model. Yeah, so let's get into it. Weiners' model is very popular in this area of attribution. Um, so when we're talking about attribution, basically what we're doing here is we are figuring out or, researching, studying whether individuals are attributing certain behaviors to internal or external factors. And this is a social perception. And so what we what we just do as humans is we go around, and when we see someone doing a certain behavior, we make decisions about whether that behavior was due to some internal aspect of the actor or the person who did the behavior, or whether that was due to situational constraints or external factors. And this, just to be clear, these perceptions can be about other people, and they can also be about ourselves. So watch this quick video, kind of an interesting, I think, application of this idea. And while you're watching, just try to think of what the motives of the objects might be, or come up with a story of what is going on. Um, and this is actually something that we just kind of naturally do. It's something that, as you'll see, maybe when you watch this video, you might just do automatically without even trying to put effort into that, even though it's not humans, right? It's just going to be objects. But from this video, a very common story that people will sometimes come up with is that the big red star is a bully. And this is just an example of an internal attribution, but there are plenty of internal and external attributions that you might come up with there. So Weiner's model, the basic point is that we as humans want to see motives and causality. We want to have a good idea of what was going on. We want to be able to explain why other people and ourselves behave the way that we do. And we do this even when we're watching a video of just some objects moving around. So with Weiner's model, there are a few dimensions that cover what we are trying to make attributions for. And so we are trying to make attributions regarding whether or not that behavior is due to something internal with the actor or something external, some situational aspects. So this is getting at the person versus situation debate that has been briefly brought up in the past. We also try to make attributions about whether or not something is controllable by the actor. And finally, we make attributions about whether or not that behavior is something that is going to be stable or unstable over time. So this is a chart that gets at combining these three various attributions under Weiners' model. So remember, we're talking about the actor, and by the actor, I just mean the person who did this certain behavior or is completing the task or whatever it might be. And so this again can be yourself or others. And so we make attributions about whether the behavior whether the behavior is internal or external. And so if we're making internal attributions, we're talking about things like ability, mood, effort, some things that are internal to the person, right? Versus if we attribute what occurred as due to external reasons. This can include some examples of this are receiving help or being harmed by others, right? That's not necessarily something that that person can control. Also, luck. So, this happens quite frequently at places like casinos, right? Oh, I didn't lose because of the effort I put in to this game or to my ability. I lost just because I was unlucky today. Also, weather is a good example of an external attribution. We also make attributions about whether or not this was controllable, right? A good example of something that's controllable is effort, right? We decide and others decide just in themselves how much effort they're going to put into a certain task. Things that are uncontrollable are task difficulty, right? Usually the actor isn't the one who made the task or activity. So that's not controllable. Additionally, mood, we talked earlier about how mood is something that can just kind of happen, like waking up on the wrong side of the bed, and we don't necessarily control that. There's not necessarily a direct reason for that, so that's uncontrollable. And again, luck, this is something that's external and uncontrollable. Finally, we make attributions about whether something is stable or not. So a behavior that's stable, we're making an attribution that that is going to be relatively consistent over time. So with effort, typical effort is something that would be stable. So whether someone is generally over time more of a hardworking person versus maybe a person that's more on the lazy side. And so stable internal, right? This is something where oftentimes this might look like traits. And then unstable mood, right? That can change relatively quickly, or luck, it can be unlucky 1 second and then win the lottery the next, or whatever it might be. So, yeah, these are just some examples for the various attributions we make based on the 3 dimensions in Weiners' model. And so next we'll get into some talk about effortful attributions.